To celebrate their new menu, my parents did something I never expected. They named a special dish after me. I was so touched, I nearly cried. But when my husband, a food scientist, read the list of ingredients, his face went white. "Don't eat it, Anna," he whispered, his eyes full of a terror I didn't understand. "It's a trap." I had no idea what he meant until I found the multi-million-dollar life insurance policy they had just taken out on me. Before we dig in, I have a quick question for you. What's one food you would never, ever eat? Let me know in the comments. And remember to subscribe for more stories every day. Okay, let's head to the restaurant. The invitation to the grand reopening of my parents' restaurant, the Miller Table, had felt like an olive branch. A very heavy, very ornate, cream-colored olive branch. For years, my relationship with my parents, Robert and Linda, had been a study in quiet, polite disappointment. They were people who valued ambition, wealth, and status above all else. They had built their restaurant empire from the ground up, and they expected the same relentless drive from their only child. Instead, they had me, a quiet librarian who had married her college sweetheart, David, a kind, brilliant, but in their eyes, profoundly unimpressive food scientist. Our life was comfortable, happy, and filled with a love that had nothing to do with stock portfolios or expansion plans. To my parents, it was a failure. They saw my life not as a choice, but a lack of potential. So when they called and insisted we attend the launch of their new, updated menu, I was hesitant, but they had sounded different, warmer. "It's important that you're here, Anna," my mother had said. "You're our daughter. We want to celebrate with you." And that little flicker of hope, the one that never quite dies, ignited in my chest. Maybe this time it would be different. The restaurant was a spectacle. They had remodeled, and the space was now a testament to their success. All dark wood, polished brass, and low, intimate lighting. It was packed with the city's elite, the air buzzing with the sound of important conversations and clinking wine glasses. My parents were in their element, moving through the room like royalty, accepting compliments, their faces beaming. "Anna, David, you made it," my mother Linda exclaimed, rushing over to hug us. My father, Robert, was right behind her, a broad, proud smile on his face. "We have the best table for you, and we have a little surprise. Something to show you how much you're a part of this family's success." I was so touched, I could feel tears pricking at my eyes. This was it. This was the moment of acceptance I had been craving my entire adult life. They led us to a quiet corner booth and presented us with the new menus, thick leather-bound volumes with gold tassels. "Look, Mom, Dad, I don't know what to say," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "It's beautiful." "We wanted to honor you, sweetheart," my father said, his voice full of a warmth I hadn't heard in years. "You're our daughter. You deserve to be on the menu." I was completely overwhelmed, basking in the warm, unfamiliar glow of their approval. I was so caught up in the emotional moment that I didn't notice at first the change in my husband. David, my methodical, analytical David, was not looking at me. He was staring intently at the menu, his brow furrowed in deep concentration. He read the description for my dish once, then twice. The polite, happy smile he had been wearing all evening slowly, almost imperceptibly vanished. He reached across the table and gently took the menu from my hands, his eyes still fixed on the page. I watched as the color drained from his face. He looked up from the menu, his own face a mask of pure, unadulterated, and, to me, completely incomprehensible terror. His eyes locked with mine. He gave a tiny, almost invisible shake of his head. Then he leaned forward, his voice a low, urgent, and terrified whisper that cut through my happy haze like a shard of ice. "We have to leave," he said. "Now." "What?" I whispered back, confused and embarrassed. David, what are you talking about? We just got here. Anna, listen to me, he hissed, his hand reaching across the table to grip mine, his fingers cold and tight. Do not order that dish. Do not eat anything. We are getting up and we are walking out of this restaurant right now. I stared at my husband's terrified face, then at my parents, who were smiling at me from across the room, oblivious. I was trapped between a gesture of what I thought was pure love and a warning of absolute bone-chilling terror. And in that moment, I had no idea which one was the lie. The world seemed to slow down, the cheerful, sophisticated buzz of the restaurant fading into a dull, distant roar in my ears. The only thing that was real was my husband's hand, cold and tight around mine, and the look of pure, primal terror in his eyes. He wasn't just worried, he was terrified. "David, you're scaring me," I whispered, my voice trembling. "What is it? What's wrong with the dish?" "I can't explain here," he hissed, his eyes darting nervously towards my parents, who were now watching us with expressions of growing confusion and annoyance. "Just trust me, Anna, please. For the love of God, trust me." The raw, desperate plea in his voice was something I had never heard before. This was not my calm, rational, scientific husband. This was a man staring into an abyss. I made a split-second decision. I chose him. I chose to trust him. I gave my parents a wobbly, apologetic smile. "You know what? I'm suddenly not feeling very well. I think I might need some fresh air." Before they could protest, David was on his feet, pulling me with him. "So sorry," he said to my bewildered parents. "We'll call you tomorrow." He practically dragged me through the crowded restaurant, our apologies a scattered trail behind us as we fled, leaving my parents sitting at their table of honor, their faces a mixture of fury and utter bewilderment. We didn't speak until we were safely locked inside our car in the parking garage. The silence was thick and heavy, broken only by my own ragged breathing. "Okay," I said, turning to him, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Talk to me. What just happened? You completely humiliated my parents. You ruined what was supposed to be a reconciliation." "A reconciliation?" he said, his voice a low, angry growl that was completely unlike him. He ran a hand through his hair, his face pale and slick with a sweat I now recognized as fear. "Anna, that wasn't a reconciliation. That was an execution." "What are you talking about?" I cried, my frustration and confusion boiling over. "It was a dish. A lamb dish with a fancy name. You're a food scientist, David, not a conspiracy theorist."
"Exactly," he said, his eyes locking with mine, and the look in them was so full of a cold, scientific certainty that it chilled me to the bone. I am a food scientist, which means I know that Rosmarinus sylvestris, he quoted the name from the menu, his voice dripping with a terrible irony, is not just a wild Tuscan rosemary. That's a marketing term. It's the scientific name for a very specific, very rare subspecies of the plant, and its cold-pressed extract, in the concentration needed to infuse a piece of meat, is something I have only ever read about in toxicology journals. He took a deep, shuddering breath. "Anna," he said, his voice now a quiet, terrible whisper, "you know your allergy, the one you've had since you were a little girl, the one that put you in the hospital twice, the one your parents know about better than anyone in the world." My blood ran cold. My allergy, it was so rare, so specific, that I hadn't had a reaction in over a decade. An allergy to a specific protein found only in the pollen of a rare, wild varietal of rosemary that grew in one specific region of Italy. An allergy so severe that even a trace amount could cause anaphylactic shock. "The extract of Rosmarinus sylvestris," David continued, his voice the calm, detached tone of a scientist delivering a fatal diagnosis, "is one of the most potent, concentrated forms of that exact protein in the world. A single drop would be enough to close your throat in under a minute. A full infusion, like the one described on that menu, it wouldn't just make you sick, Anna. It would be lethal. And the reaction would be so swift, so severe, it would look just like a tragic, sudden, and completely unexplainable allergic reaction to a normal meal. The words, lethal, unexplainable, tragic accident, they hung in the silent car like a death sentence. "No," I whispered, shaking my head in denial. "No, it has to be a mistake, a coincidence. They wouldn't. They're my parents." "A coincidence?" David's voice was sharp, cutting through my denial. "Anna, I have a PhD in botanical toxicology. I have published papers on this exact protein family. The odds of a chef, any chef, accidentally using that specific, obscure, and incredibly dangerous varietal in a commercial dish is 0. It's not used in cooking for this very reason. To put that on a menu, to name it after you, knowing your history, that is not a coincidence. That is a meticulously planned, scientifically precise, and almost perfect murder weapon." I stared at him, my mind a screaming void. The beautiful, heartfelt note from my parents, the warm, loving phone call, the grand, public gesture of naming a dish after me. It wasn't an olive branch, it was a trap. A carefully baited, perfectly executed trap. They hadn't invited me to their restaurant to celebrate me. They had invited me there to kill me. The full, monstrous weight of the truth crashed down on me. My silent sacrifice, the years I had spent trying to earn their love, trying to be the daughter they wanted, had all been for nothing. They didn't see me as a daughter. They saw me as a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be removed. But why? The question screamed in my mind. Why would they do this? And then another, colder, and even more terrible memory surfaced. A conversation from a few weeks ago. My father, on the phone, talking about his new investment advisor and the importance of getting our affairs in order. He had asked me to sign some routine paperwork for a new life insurance policy, one that he said would protect me and David in the future. "It's just a formality, honey, something to give us all peace of mind." I signed it without a second thought. I looked at my husband, my eyes wide with a new, dawning horror. "The life insurance policy," I whispered. He just nodded, his own face a mask of grim, terrible understanding. "They're in financial trouble, Anna," he said. "I've suspected it for months. This was their bailout plan." The love I had felt for my parents, the desperate, hopeful love of a daughter, finally, completely died in that moment. It was replaced by a cold, hard, and unshakable resolve. They had tried to take my life. They had tried to turn my own husband into an unwitting widower. They had made a terrible, terrible mistake. They had underestimated my husband, and they had underestimated me. "Drive," I said to David, my voice no longer a whisper, but a command. "Take me home. I need to make a phone call." The drive home was a silent, suffocating journey through a world that no longer made sense. The familiar streets of my own neighborhood looked alien, the cheerful lights of other people's homes like distant, unfeeling stars. I was a passenger in my own life. My husband David's quiet, steady presence, the only thing keeping me from completely dissociating. The truth of what my parents had tried to do was a monstrous, indigestible thing, a piece of jagged glass in my throat. They had not just wished me ill, they had planned my end. They had written the final chapter of my life and named it after a dish of lamb. When we arrived home, the safety of our small, quiet house felt like a flimsy shield. I walked into our living room and my eyes immediately fell upon a framed photograph on the mantelpiece, a picture of me and my mother laughing together on a long-ago beach vacation. The image of her, so full of what I had always believed to be love, was now a grotesque mockery. With a cold, deliberate calm, I took the photo, removed it from its frame, and tore it into small, precise pieces, dropping them into the trash. It was a small, symbolic act of severance. The woman in that photograph, my best friend, my confidant, was a lie. And I was done living with her ghost. "What are we going to do?" David asked, his voice a low rumble of protective rage. "We have to go to the police, Anna. This is attempted murder." "And say what?" I asked, my voice hollow. "That my husband, a food scientist, thinks an ingredient on a menu was dangerous? That my parents, the beloved philanthropists who own the Miller Table, tried to poison me? It would be my word against theirs. They would say you were a jealous, overreactive husband. They would say I was a hysterical daughter. They would twist it. They would lie. They are brilliant at lying. We have no proof." The word hung in the air between us. Proof. My mind, which had been a chaotic storm of grief and terror, suddenly became still and clear. The analytical part of me, the librarian who organized information and sought out primary sources, took over. I was no longer a victim. I was a researcher, and this was the most important research project of my life. "I need two things, David," I said, my voice now steady, my plan beginning to form. "I need proof of the ingredient, and I need proof of the motive." The first part was the most immediate challenge. In our frantic escape from the restaurant, we had left the menus, the only physical evidence of the dish named in my honor, sitting on the table. I couldn't go back, but I knew someone who could. I called my oldest friend Jessica, a woman I trusted implicitly, and explained a heavily edited version of the story. I told her I'd had bizarre and frightening argument with my parents at the restaurant and that I desperately needed a photo of the new menu, specifically of a dish named after me.
The next day, feigning a desire to try the new restaurant, she went for lunch. She sent me a series of crisp, clear, time-stamped photos of the menu, including a close-up of Anna's Rosemary Delight and its damning list of ingredients. She even managed to order the dish to go, claiming her husband at home was desperate to try it. That night, David and I were in his university laboratory. The campus was dark and silent, and the lab, usually a place of quiet academic discovery, now felt like a forensic crime lab. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, we worked. He carefully took a sample of the rich, dark sauce from the lamb dish. He prepared the slides. He calibrated the machine. He ran a gas chromatography mass spectrometry test, a procedure so precise it can identify every single chemical compound in a substance. I watched, my heart pounding, as the machine whirred and the results appeared on the computer screen. It was a series of complex graphs and chemical signatures. To me, it was nonsense, but to David, it was a confession. "There it is," he whispered, his finger tracing a sharp, dramatic spike on the graph. He pointed to the chemical name at the bottom of the screen, the exact protein that triggers your specific anaphylaxis. And the concentration, my God, Anna, it's even higher than I thought. This isn't just an infusion, this is a weapon. He printed the results, a single irrefutable sheet of scientific truth. We now had proof of the weapon. Now, I needed to find the motive. The next morning, I confronted the second part of the puzzle, the life insurance policy my father had so casually had me sign. He had taken the documents with him that day for safekeeping in his bank's safe deposit box, a place I couldn't access. But I remembered something. Years ago, when I had first moved out of their house, he had made me a co-signer on a different, smaller safe deposit box at the same bank, a place where they kept important family documents like my birth certificate. Just in case of an emergency, he had said. I knew he had a terrible memory, and I was banking on the fact that he had never gotten around to removing my name. Walking into that bank was one of the most terrifying things I have ever done. I felt like a spy, an imposter. My hands were slick with sweat as I presented my key and my identification to the bank officer. He checked the records. My name was still there. I was led into the cold, silent vault, the great steel door closing behind me with a heavy, final thud. I found their box. I took out my key, my hand shaking so badly it took me 3 tries to get it into the lock. I opened the box, and there it was. On top of a pile of old property deeds and stock certificates was a thick, new folder. I opened it. It was a multi-million-dollar life insurance policy taken out just 1 month ago. The insured was me,
Anna Miller, and the sole beneficiaries were my parents, Robert and Linda Miller. I sat there on the cold, hard floor of that bank vault, holding the proof of my own parents' premeditated plot to murder me, and I felt nothing but a profound, empty coldness. I took the policy document, leaving everything else as it was. I walked out of the bank and back into the sunlight, the 3 pieces of my puzzle now complete: the photo of the menu, the lab report, and the life insurance policy. I had everything I needed. I went home. I placed the 3 exhibits in a neat, orderly row on my dining room table. Then I picked up the phone and dialed my mother's number. She answered with a voice full of a cloying, false concern. "Anna, darling, we were so worried. Are you feeling better?"
"I'm feeling much better, Mom," I said, my voice eerily calm. "In fact, I'd love to make it up to you both for our hasty departure. Could you and Dad please come over for dinner tomorrow night? I have something very important that I need to discuss with you both." "Of course, sweetie," she said, relief flooding her voice. "We'd love to." I hung up the phone. They were coming. They were walking into my house, my territory, expecting a quiet, apologetic family dinner. They had no idea they had just accepted an invitation to their own trial. And I had just appointed myself the judge, the jury, and the executioner. The following evening, my home was a stage, and I was its sole meticulous director. The air was thick with a tense, manufactured calm. I didn't cook. The thought of preparing a meal in the kitchen that had so often been a backdrop to my mother's loving deceptions was more than I could bear. Instead, I ordered simple, catered food. I set the dining room table not with our festive family china, but with my plainest everyday dishes. This was not a celebration. It was a tribunal. On the polished wood of the dining table, I arranged my evidence, my 3 exhibits, in a neat, undeniable row. Exhibit A: a large framed, high-resolution photograph of the restaurant menu, the Anna's Rosemary Delight clearly visible. Exhibit B: the cold, hard, scientific printout from my husband David's mass spectrometer, its graph showing a single, massive, lethal spike. The report laminated for effect. Exhibit C: the original, thick, and official-looking life insurance policy, its multi-million-dollar sum, and my parents' names as sole beneficiaries, stark and clear under the dining room light. When the doorbell rang at precisely 7 o'clock, my heart gave a single, hard thud, but my hands were perfectly steady. I was ready. They walked in, a perfect portrait of parental concern. My mother, Linda, was carrying a bouquet of expensive lilies, her face a mask of worried sympathy. My father, Robert, had a bottle of my favorite wine in his hand, a look of paternal regret on his face. Their performance was, as always, flawless. "Anna, darling," my mother said, rushing to hug me. "We were so worried about you. You looked so pale when you left. Is everything all right?" "Everything is fine, Mom," I said, stepping back from her embrace. "I'm much better now. Thank you for coming." The small talk over dinner was a surreal, agonizing exercise in hypocrisy. They spoke of the restaurant's successful opening night. They spoke of their plans for a new summer menu. They acted as if the night before had been nothing more than a small, strange hiccup, an unfortunate bout of illness on my part. They were attempting to rewrite history, to smooth over the cracks in their perfect facade. I let them. I played my part, the quiet, agreeable daughter, until the last of the plates had been cleared. "Before you go," I said, my voice quiet but firm, stopping them as they began to gather their things, "There's something I need to show you. In the dining room." They followed me, their expressions shifting to ones of mild curiosity. They saw the documents laid out on the table, and a flicker of confusion crossed their faces. I did not sit down. I stood at the head of the table, a prosecutor about to present her closing argument. "I believe you recognize this." I pushed the framed menu towards them. "The dish you so lovingly named in my honor, Anna's Rosemary Delight. It was a tribute to you, sweetheart, to show you how much you are a part of our success." "I see," I said. I then slid the laminated lab report next to the menu. "Then I'm sure you'll be interested in this. This is a full chemical analysis of that dish, conducted last night at a university laboratory. My husband was kind enough to run the tests. I'll draw your attention to the highlighted compound here on page 3. Its name is salvinorin A. It is the primary psychoactive molecule found in the Rosmarinus sylvestris plant. I let the scientific name hang in the air. It is also, as you know from the 2 times I was hospitalized as a child, the one and only substance in the world to which I have a fatal anaphylactic allergy." The color began to drain from my father's face. My mother just stared, a look of utter, blank incomprehension on her face. I don't understand," she stammered. "The chef must have made a mistake." "There was no mistake," I said, my voice as cold and as sharp as ice. I let her desperate, flimsy lie hang in the air for a moment before I played my final card. I slid the thick, official-looking life insurance policy across the table to them. It landed with a soft, heavy thud in front of my father. "And this," I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper, "is the $3 million life insurance policy you took out on me 3 weeks before you put that tribute on your menu. The policy where you two," I looked from my father's ashen face to my mother's, "are the sole beneficiaries." That was it. The final, irrefutable piece of the puzzle. The weapon, the motive, the quiet click of the trap snapping shut. My mother made a small, strangled sound and sank into a chair. My father just stared at the policy, his face a ruin of gray, defeated horror. Their lies, their performance, their entire carefully constructed world of deception. It all evaporated in an instant, leaving behind only the ugly, naked truth of their monstrous greed. They were not just bad parents. They were not just manipulative. They were killers. And they had failed. I looked at them, at these 2 strangers who had given me life and had then so coldly and meticulously planned my death, and I felt a profound and surprisingly peaceful sense of release. I finally asked the one question that had been haunting me for the last 24 hours. I need to know," I said, my voice a genuine, curious whisper. "When you were planning it, when you were designing the menu and calling the insurance agent, was it hard? Did you feel anything at all? Or was it just business?" They had no answer. My mother was now openly, hysterically sobbing, not with remorse, but with the pure, selfish terror of being caught. My father just looked broken. I had my answer. I turned, walked to the kitchen counter, and picked up my phone. They watched me, their eyes wide with a new, dawning, and absolute terror. Who was I calling? I dialed a number I now knew by heart and put the phone on speaker. It rang once. "Homicide Division, Detective Miller speaking." I looked at my parents, at their terrified, trapped faces. "Detective?" I said, my voice calm and clear. "It's Anna Miller. We spoke yesterday. They're here. And I believe," I said,
my gaze locking with my mother's. They are ready to make a full confession. The look of pure, soul-shattering terror on my parents' faces when they realized the police were not on their way, but had been a part of my plan all along, was the last thing I saw before I turned and walked out of the room, leaving them to their fate. The sound of the detective's calm, professional voice on the speakerphone was the sound of the world shifting on its axis. It was the sound of the end. My mother, who had been sobbing hysterically into her hands, froze, her head snapping up, her eyes wide with a new, dawning, and absolute terror. My father, who had been a statue of gray, defeated shame, seemed to crumble in on himself, a low, guttural moan escaping his lips. They had been so certain in their little bubble of deception, they had never, for a single arrogant moment, considered that I would not just discover their secret, but that I would have the cold, calculated strength to bring the full weight of the law down upon them. The next few minutes were a surreal, out-of-body experience. I didn't have to wait long. Two plainclothes detectives, a man and a woman who had clearly been waiting in an unmarked car just down the street, walked calmly up my driveway and knocked on the front door. I let them in. The scene that unfolded in my living room was one of quiet, bureaucratic horror. There was no shouting, no struggle. My parents' monstrous, theatrical lies were met with the calm, methodical, and utterly unimpeachable procedures of the law. The detectives read them their rights. They were informed they were under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder. I watched as my mother's hands were cuffed behind her back, her expensive silk blouse now looking absurdly out of place. I watched as my father was led, unresisting, out of the home he had been welcome into so many times, his face a blank mask of utter ruin. As they were being led to the unmarked cars, my mother turned to me one last time, her face a twisted, unrecognizable mess of tears and hatred. "You did this!" she spat, the words a venomous, pathetic last gasp. "You destroyed your own family!" I just looked at her, my heart a cold, still thing in my chest. "No, Mom," I said, my voice quiet but clear. "I didn't. You did." The fallout was, as expected, a media firestorm in our small city. The story was a thing of nightmares, a local restaurateur couple attempting to murder their own daughter for insurance money. The name The Miller Table became synonymous not with fine dining, but with a dark and twisted domestic horror. The restaurant, of course, closed within a week, its reputation, like my parents' lives, destroyed beyond repair. The legal process was long and agonizing. My parents, faced with the irrefutable evidence of the lab report, the insurance policy, and their own damning, secretly recorded words from the birthday party video, had no defense. Their high-priced lawyers managed to get them a plea bargain. They were sentenced to 20 years in prison, a sentence that meant, for all intents and purposes, they would likely die there. I attended the sentencing. I stood before the judge and gave a victim impact statement. I did not speak of anger or of revenge. I spoke of the profound, soul-shattering nature of their betrayal. I spoke of the mother who had been my best friend and the father I had always sought to please. I spoke of the daughter they had been willing to sacrifice on the altar of their own greed. I spoke of the life they had not just tried to end, but the life of trust and love they had already murdered long before they ever put that poison on the menu. When it was all over, when the legal battles were done and the headlines had faded, I was left in the quiet, empty aftermath. I had justice, I had my life, but I was a different person, a woman who had been forced to look into the abyss and see her own parents staring back. My vindication, I discovered, was not in their imprisonment. It was in my own survival. It was in the quiet, unwavering love of my husband, David, the man whose scientific mind and steadfast loyalty had literally saved my life. It was in the innocent, happy laughter of my son, a sound I now cherish with a fierce protective love that was almost painful. I used the significant sum from the now canceled life insurance policy, which the courts had awarded to me as restitution, to start something new. I created a foundation, a small, local foundation dedicated to providing financial and legal aid to victims of a very specific kind of crime: domestic financial abuse and fraud within families. I had learned, through my own horror, that this kind of secret, silent crime happened far more often than anyone knew. I had the resources, and now I had the voice to help. It's been 2 years. I am no longer a quiet librarian. I am an advocate, a fighter. I stand on stages, not at fancy restaurant openings, but at community fundraisers and support groups, and I tell my story. I tell it not for pity, but as a warning and as a promise. A warning that monsters can sometimes look just like the people you love, and a promise that you can survive them. My parents, in their arrogance, had made one fatal, catastrophic mistake. They thought I was weak. They mistook my quiet nature for a lack of strength. But my vindication, my final true revenge, was in taking the absolute worst thing they could ever do to me and transforming it into the best thing I have ever done. I took their monstrous, selfish plot and I repurposed it for good. I took the inheritance they tried to steal and I used it to build a legacy of my own, one built not on lies and greed, but on truth, on justice, and on the quiet, unshakable strength of a survivor. An absolutely chilling story of betrayal and a powerful reminder of the strength of a survivor. What do you think of the way Anna used her own pain to help others? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by this incredible story of justice, please show your support by hitting that like button and be sure to subscribe for more powerful stories every day. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.